You know, when you walk through the gates in and around the dressing room, you look around the dressing room here at the Oval, there's all the great names on the wall and all the pictures.
First of all, it's a fantastic ground. People say Lord's is a home of cricket, and quite rightly so. But here at the Oval, it has its own special atmosphere.
When people come to the Oval, when the West Indies team come to the Oval, when the supporters come to the Oval, they feel as if they're at home.
It's a ground where you know when you're coming up to turn up, you're going to have incredible support.
We've had some magical moments at the Oval, and it's served up some result pictures. I mean, none more so than the Ashes we won in 2005.
It's actually the place where a lot of Australian history has been made as well as English history.
I think that this ground has had more memorable test matches than any other I know.
You said you still think England has a chance.
Well, if it doesn't rain, I think we'll pull through.
Ah, you mean the harvest?
No, sir, I mean the Oval wicket with 560-odd runs to make in the first innings. But if those off-spinners
Be so
find
good, sir, as to inform me what in blazes you're talking about.
Cricket, Governor. The final test. England versus Australia at the Oval.
My own first Oval test was 1964, but I've read so much about the early ones that I feel I was there, going back to 1882, where the Ashes were born at this very ground. Someone said the ashes of English cricket are being taken to Australia, and that was the start of it all. The first of the great 20th century Ashes tests at the Oval was 1902, where England won by 1 wicket. All seemed lost until Jessup came in and smashed 100 in 75 minutes. When the last man came in, young Wilfred Rhodes, they still needed 15 to win, and his Yorkshire teammate George Hurst greeted him in the middle. Legend has it that one said to the other, "We'll get him in singles." Well, I interviewed Wilfred Rhodes in the 70s, and I put that to him. He said, "Oh no, we didn't say that. That wouldn't have been sensible, would it? We might have got a 2. And in fact they did. They got a 2 and a 4, and they got the 15 runs, and they stole this thrilling victory by 1 wicket. And I suppose that was the second of the great Oval Test matches.
1912 saw C.B. Fry captain England to a famous Ashes triumph, while in 1926 the nation was entranced by Jack Hobbs and Herbert Sutcliffe. During that Test match, Len Hutton was 10 years old. 12 years later, he would take centre stage.
I think of all the Oval Tests, the most famous was the last one before the war, the last Ashes Test here, when England made 903 for 7, and Wally Hammond only declared because Don Bradman had turned his ankle and was not going to bat.
But as the evening sun brings out the long shadows, Hutton and Leyland continue their victory march, an epic that will surely write a new page in Test history. 250, 300, and never a chance.
Well, the most famous aspect of that game, of course, was that the young Yorkshireman, Len Hutton, batted for 13 hours and 17 minutes and scored 364.
Hutton gets his 300 and looks like going on to 1,000. Meanwhile, Uncle George from Hutton's hometown of Pudsey has arrived to see what's going on, but these oval turnstiles aren't so hot. And now the Empire holds its breath, 310, and Uncle George is getting desperate. And the stroke that breaks the record. While the world cheers, Bradman is first to congratulate the youngster who beat Don's own record. The highest individual score in any Test match, the longest innings by any batsman in first-class cricket.
8 years ago, I was very fortunate to see Don Bradman get his wonderful score at Leeds, and I little realised that 8 years later I should be in a position to beat it.
Always a forward-thinking ground, the Oval has seen many firsts in English cricket, with Australian opener Victor Trumper playing his part during an Ashes Test in 1905.
I think it's probably the oldest and most famous of all cricket action photographs. It's a photograph taken by George Belden, the Middlesex amateur, of Trumper jumping out to drive. And it was taken here. I suspect it was taken in about 1905. It's interesting, you can if you have a look at the background, you get quite a decent view of what the environs of the Oval looked like in 1905. It's perhaps one of the greatest sort of technical documents created of any cricketer at any time, and it's become almost a kind of an art object in its own right, and it's very, very much placed at the Oval.
Another landmark in cricketing history is the final innings of the great Sir Donald Bradman, which famously took place at the Oval in 1948.
1948, I was a lad, and I remember that there was shock when Bradman got naught.
Bradman came out, was surrounded and given 3 cheers by the England team led by Norman Yardley, and faced up to Eric Hollies, probably the best known story just about in cricket history, certainly the best known naught.
Don came in and played the first ball out to mid-off. John Arlott said towards the Houses of Parliament, but it doesn't go quite that far. And then the second one was a googly, and Hollies had bowled a googly at him in the Warwickshire match, and he saw that there was uncertainty, and I think that if Bradman had a weakness, it was to the wrong one.
And he was bowled second ball by Hollies' googly. There's a wonderful piece of commentary by John Arlott where he talks about Bradman wondering whether Bradman had seen the ball clearly at all, you know, what goes through a player's mind under those circumstances.
Nonetheless, the ball went through and Don was gone, and he just turned on his heel and slowly left the ground. And when he got back in the dressing room, he didn't throw his bat, he didn't break down in tears, he just said, "Fancy doing a thing like that."
Well, we know that Bradman really wanted those 4 runs to get his 100 average in cricket, and he was a bit disappointed not to get it. The other thing is, of course, we didn't know at the time it was going to be his last innings, because there was potentially a second innings in the game, but Australia was so successful, they vanquished England so thoroughly that Bradman had no opportunity to come out and do it again.
So it was goodbye to him, and at the other end, of course, was Arthur Morris. And people used to say to Arthur, "You played in that match, didn't you, Arthur?" He said, "Yeah, I got 196. And that's fate, isn't it? Bradman gets naught and all the headlines, Arthur gets 196 and is pretty well forgotten.
While John Arlott might have found the perfect words to describe the Don's finale, 43 years later, a young Test match special commentator was trying to make his mark on the airwaves and had Ian Botham's latest comeback to help him out.
It was my first summer of working on Test Match Special, and I was what they laughingly referred to as an expert summariser. Laughingly, because the other 2 were Fred Truman and Trevor Bailey, and I think John had actually spent much that summer trying to work out who I was. This young bloke, you know, who got 4 Test wickets at 90, you know. And there was so much that was going on. I mean, Ian Botham was back in the side, because England had to win that Test match against the West Indies, which was a pretty good effort in those days. So they called back the man who was serving one of his suspensions. And so when Ian came back, there was lots of talk in the news, sort of typical Ian Botham type, sort of broken beds of Barbados and these various things. And I think that's what probably got John as slightly intrigued and reminded him, actually. And it just came out, he didn't get his leg over. And when you listen to it, you'll hear about 1.5 seconds of silence when I said this. Which is quite a long time on radio. John has looked like he'd taken a right hook from Mike Tyson. I mean, there were tears pouring down his face. There's a clatter of china in the background because Bill Frindle was having a cup of tea. And he had a nose for innuendos bigger than Brian's, really. He'd got to hear with a cup of tea. And if you listen, you'll hear the clatter of china as he slaps the cup down in the saucer again. And mixture of sort of horror and I think some excitement maybe at what might happen as a result of this.
Both of them at the end out most extraordinary way.
He knew, this is the tragic thing about it, he knew exactly what was going to happen. He tried to step over the stumps and just flicked a bail with his right
He more or less tried to do the splits over it, and unfortunately the inner part of his thigh must have just removed the bail.
He just didn't quite get his leg over.
Anyhow, he did very well indeed, batting 131 minutes and hit 3 fours.
So it's chaos, and so I've got Brian to my right and Bill over there laughing, and just completely wiped out really. And here's Tony Cozier to my left. And in those days, you had these big old microphones that came out there right in front of your mouth. And they were live all the time. And so Tony, who was sitting here just writing his report for his Barbados newspaper, would have seen the utter chaos to his right. The fact that we couldn't broadcast, really. And so the temptation for him to have said something, to have rescued the situation must have been enormous. But he's always maintained that his best bit of commentary ever was actually not saying anything.
He just didn't quite get his leg over.
Anyhow, he did very well indeed, batting 131 minutes and hit 3 fours. And then we had Lewis playing extremely well for his 47 not out. Aggers, do stop it. And he was joined by De Freitas, who was in for 40 minutes, a useful little partnership there. They put on 35 in 40 minutes, and then he was caught by Dujon Walsh. Lawrence, always entertaining, batting for 35 minutes, hit a 4 over the wicketkeepers. Aggers, for goodness sake, stop it. Hit a
Yes, Lawrence played extremely well.
He hit a 4 over the wicketkeeper's head, and he was out for 9. And Tufnell came, batted for 12 minutes, and then was caught by Haynes off Pietersen for 2, and there were 54 extras, and England were all out for 419. I've stopped laughing now.
It's one of those moments where if everyone who claims to have heard it live that day really was listening, I mean, we would have had an audience of about 20 million. So, I mean, it's where were you when JFK was shot, isn't it? It's one of those moments where I think memories sort of get a bit saggy over the years. But a lot were listening, and because the next day, Brian wasn't very happy about it, and he stomped off. We went off air almost immediately afterwards, that shambolic minute and a half. And I can still see him now. I mean, bear in mind, it was my first summer on TMS, so this was not a great start, really. The main man stomping off into the night, shaking his head. I can see it now. And he went home and he talked to his son Barry about it and said he was really worried about this, thought it'd be unprofessional, he'd let the side down, all that sort of thing. And the next day, all these letters arrived. He was still getting letters in those days, of course, and they were coming thick and fast from people who were listening, including one from Ronnie Corbett's wife, which is a bit bizarre. But anyway, I mean, he read these, and you could see him gradually relaxing about it. And I said, come on, apparently it's really funny. He went downstairs to the old engineer's room there, and they were franking these copies off quickly, because they knew they were onto a good thing, sticking them onto cassettes. And he sat and he listened and he loved it. And wherever he went from then on, I mean, even when he had his heart attack in the taxi, he was off to speak at a lunch somewhere in Bristol, I think it was, and he had one of those cassette copies in his pocket that he was going to play. And I mean, the fact that people are still laughing about it now, over 20 years after he died, he would think was fantastic.
While Aggers and Johners giggled their way into the heart of a nation, 1964 saw an altogether more stern-faced individual complete an era-defining achievement. And a young county colleague of his was watching on, playing in just his 4th Test match.
Well, Fred was my idol. And so when I grew up and went to play at Yorkshire, he was in his pomp round about 62 when I first started. Great fast bowler, perfect action. The best action I've ever seen in my life. Sideways on. And the other thing about Fred, he never broke down. Hardly ever. You see bowlers today breaking down with injuries and pulled muscles. We've never heard of the muscles. Fred, Truman, Bedser, hardly ever broke down. And when we got to the Oval series, or that 64 series, he got picked the first test, got picked the second test, third he got left out for Old Trafford. I think that was the 4th test match. And there was a concern and worry that he was not going to get this magic figure of 300 wickets because he was coming towards the end, but they picked him for the Oval. And it didn't come easily, those wickets. That final one, it just wasn't coming. So he felt the pressure. He definitely did, because I was in the dressing room at Yorkshire before the match with it. And then when it finally came, it was a great release, the nick to slip. And I think most people were relieved for him, because he'd been a great fast bowler, not good. We use the word and misuse it so often, great. He was a truly great fast bowler with a fabulous action, and he was a delight to play with. So when he got the wicket, yeah, we were all pleased for him. I think the public of England were pleased.
4 years later, the Australians returned to the Oval. After John Edrich hit a brilliant 164 on his home ground, the visitors were set 352 to win.
1968 was in one way, the most sensational Oval Test of all, because it was not going to happen. The rain had been so heavy, the ground was flooded, that John Snow and Underwood and Milburn, they're all just lying back on the benches and wanting to go home. They knew the match couldn't be resumed. But the crowd went out there, the ground staff got all sorts of help with squeegees, ropes, spikes, and the miracle happened. The ground became just about playable, and out they went with not much time. They worked their way down to number 11, and there was a lull, and it was frustrating because the clock at the Vauxhall end was ticking. I think Wisden says 7 minutes to go. In fact, it was less than that. It could have been 3 or 4. And Underwood took his 7th wicket. He trapped poor old Inverera, didn't play a shot, and the ball came back in, and that was that. So England pulled off a victory that was inconceivable 5 or 6 hours earlier, when the Oval was a lake.
India had made their Oval debut in 1936 and subsequently toured England on 5 other occasions. However, they had never recorded a victory over their hosts on English soil until 1971.
Oval Test match in 1971 where India won. Chandrasekhar's taking six wickets for 38, and it was just amazing because the feeling was electric. The other thing that stands out, and which is a coincidence on the day that we are doing this interview, is it was also the birth anniversary of one of the most revered gods in the Hindu religion, Lord Ganpati. So India won that first ever test on his birthday, and today, as I'm doing the interview, today is the same birthday today, and so there you are.
Huge day for Indian cricket because that's the first time ever India won a test match abroad, especially in England. And I remember I was part of the batting setup, and I got runs in both the innings. Not too many. We didn't need too many. It was a low-scoring game. I remember very clearly that Abid Ali came into bat with we had only Bishan Bedi and Chandrasekhar to bat, and Chandra and Bishan didn't know which side of the bat to hold. So I told Abid Ali that just take it easy. There was plenty of time. Ellingworth was the captain. They were almost given up the game here. Don't do anything silly. And I think first ball, he charged down the wicket, and Alan Knott, great keeper, he missed a stumping or something. So that was the last ball of the over. And we needed, I think, 1 run to win when I was batting, or 2 runs to win. And I made the biggest mistake by taking a single and leaving it to Abid Ali. I said, now, don't do anything stupid, because only Bishan and Chandra are there to bat, and we could put England back into the game here. But Abid Ali charges down the pitch, gets the top edge over the slips for 4 runs, and next thing I see, he's been carried away by all the supporters. I said, I've been slapping here for the last 2.5 hours on the wicket. But it was nice. Even saw an elephant in the ground. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was the largest person on the ground till I saw the elephant. And I don't know who had the audacity, or how did he get through the turnstiles? I'm not sure how he wouldn't get in these days, I think.
There was an elephant on the ground. It was incredible. I've never seen that, and I don't think it's ever happened after that you've had an elephant on the ground. God knows how the elephant made its entrance, but the elephant was there. And it's incredible. I mean, as I say, we've seen weird things happening on the field of cricket, but this was weird indeed. But maybe that, again, on that particular day, was an omen of the things to come, because Lord Ganpati that we talked about, whose birthday was when India won, is a god with a trunk for a nose. And there you are. So I think that the elephant coming down was for us a blessing.
27 years later, Sri Lanka were about to follow in India's footsteps and unleash a new superstar on world cricket.
It was the only test match we played on that tour. It was a one-off test, and played summer. I think it was either August or September we played that game. And was really special. I mean, it was a special game for Murali to start off with, but I think for the entire country, it was something special because that's the first time we've beaten England in England in a test match, and then had the belief going forward after that.
When you have your first overseas win, that gives you the confidence that you will be able to do that more regularly, more often, and that is what players and teams are looking for.
That's bowled him right through the gate. What a magnificent delivery, and just look how far this turns.
Now this has come in a long, long way.
Muralitharan has made an important move here for Sri Lanka.
It only started turning viciously only on that last day. I mean, till then, I think England were controlling the game. I remember Sanath and Aravinda scored 2 big hundreds, which gave us that first big innings score. And we managed to put England under pressure with a bit of a lead. We only had about 130 runs or 118 or 20 runs lead in that first innings, but they found it very tough, and Murali started to, bowl quite well.
Doing well at home is very good. It's special, but I think when you do well overseas, you win overseas, that's even more special. That's extra special. And I think just like 1971 was the turning point in Indian cricket, I do believe the 1998 win over here for Sri Lanka changed their outlook and their thought processes as far as playing out of Sri Lanka was concerned.
There's a significance in that historic win for Test cricket, and then for the next generation of guys to believe that we could go overseas and win Test matches, and we managed to do that.
200 for Sanath Jayasuriya. What an entertainer. What an innings.
The atmosphere was fantastic. We had so many people coming and watching that Test match. A lot of Sri Lankans were looking forward to that opportunity. Before that, I think we haven't played a Test match here for a long time. I think 6-7 years. So it was a historic occasion for Sri Lanka, and for it to be at the Oval made it brilliant. I know still a lot of people have good fond memories of that Test match, and especially for the players who played in that. It was something special.
Murali's 16 wickets in 1998 brought back memories of one of the all-time great final tests, when a young Jamaican, Michael Holding, thrilled a famously partisan crowd with one of the greatest displays of fast bowling ever seen.
Well, it used to be a place where West Indian fans would turn up in their droves. I mean, that's not quite the case now, sadly, but back in the day when Michael Holding was performing so brilliantly in 1976, you get a fantastic turnout of West Indian fans here.
1976, to be honest, I was living in this country, I was in Jamaica, but there's a fellow Jamaican by the name of Michael Holding.
One of my earliest memories, I would have probably been four years old, was the final Test match, England versus West Indies in '76. Drought of summer, standpipes outside, oval bleached white, and Michael Holding bowling the speed of light on the flattest pitch of all time, and that kind of stuck with me forever.
Over 1,000 runs scored in the first innings, which is unique, and then we still got a result. The rest of the guys in the team, the West Indies team, the fast bowlers that is, they were a little bit more experienced than myself. When they saw the pitch, the series already won, I think they throttled back a bit. Me being a young, naive young man running in and trying to bowl fast, I just kept on running in. And of course, when I started to take wickets, you'd forget about flat pitches after that. You just keep on running in, bowling fast. And if you keep on taking wickets, it doesn't feel as if you're doing anything.
Yeah, it was mighty. I mean, you talk about the West Indies team. The West Indies is made up of islands. And you know what? There's one thing, even now, that binds the whole Caribbean, and it's cricket. Probably back in 1976, you hear, I learned a lot of my cricket listening on the radio, really, But that's what it was. This guy was just unbelievable, the type of cricket they played, the brand of cricket they played, how good they were, and all that business, you see. So it was just absolutely unique. And I said, for me to come here and, take my best bowling figures here as well, as I said, those seeds, as I mentioned to you, was planted way back in 1976.
And it was great because also of the fact that Tony Greig had made that comment at the beginning of the tour about him going to make the West Indies team grovel. And of course, because we had already won the series then, the West Indians turned up even more to look at Tony Greig and to keep on shouting at him. And in the end, they kept on shouting at the end of this first innings, grovel, Greggy, grovel. And he actually went down on his hands and knees and took the last few steps off the ground on his hands and knees, crawling off the ground. So it was great. The West Indians cheered him. Of course, they were very unhappy that he made the comment, but when they saw him do that, they gave him a loud round of applause. When you looked down onto the crowd, not just the West Indians obviously were there, but flocked with West Indians, and of course a lot of English people mixing with the West Indians, and everyone down there was having a good time. I think the English supporters would have been extremely happy that they saw some good cricket. Obviously they wanted England to win, but I think they were quite happy with the cricket that the West Indies played. So they were both supporters were down there on the ground, looking up onto the balcony, watching the presentation and cheering. And everything that took place then, they cheered. It wasn't a matter that if a West Indian got man of the match or when the trophy was being presented that the people were quiet. The English people were cheering just as well because they had appreciated watching some good cricket.
Having watched Holding destroy the England batsman in 1976, Devon Malcolm then produced an equally vicious burst of quick bowling 18 years later to record the best Test match figures the ground has ever seen.
It used to be a quick pitch here at the Oval. That was the defining feature of the early 90s, much quicker than it is now. It would be the quickest pitch in the country, and probably apart from the Wacker at Perth, it'd be amongst the quickest in the world. So you used to come here and it was a good place for fast bowlers to play. It was a good place to come and play your shots as a batsman because the ball would really fly. And Devon, of course, put in one of the great spells of fast bowling in English cricketing history in that game.
Came out to bat, second innings, and as per usual, I remember one of my team manager a few years back, I said, Keith Fletcher, I was joking with him and saying, okay, Fletch, jokingly to him, said, Fletch, where am I batting today? And he turned around to me and said, Dev, if there were 15 players in the team, you'd bat number 15, mate. So that's answer your question. I was batting number 11 there. Walk out to bat, and I could hear all the guys in the slip scoring just, saying to Fanny, give him a bounce. I bounced one of our boys. But as a fast bowler, he said, okay, this is going to be a double bluff here. Fanny going to be bowling me a Yorker. So I kept my bat down ready to, to dig this Yorker out. Fanny ran up first ball before I realized the most perfect bouncer. Clunk, hit me right between the eyes. I was not happy, and I just turned around to the guys in the slip scoring and I said, guys, if you really want to see fast bowling is about, you wait till you get into bat. I said, you guys going to be history.
As you say, he got hit on the head by Fanny de Villiers. I don't know whether that shook him up or not. There's plenty of people say it did, and then he came hurtling in and just bowled the speed of sound, really. I remember the keeper and the slips. I was one of the slips. We were miles back, 3/4 of the way back to the boundary rope, and there's beautiful carry on the ball. And South Africa's batsmen, are a bit windy, and they didn't quite fancy it.
As a fast bowler, I was working very closely with a former player from Surrey here. He was our bowling coach, Jeff Arnold. And the morning of that game, I said to him, Jeff, we normally on the pitch there doing some target practice, bowling at the cones, whatever. And I said, look, man, I feel ever so good today, Don't worry, I feel as if we're going to take 6 wickets. I said, I'm not doing the target practice. So we just sat on this field and we just have a chat. And I said, I'm going to take 6 wickets today. So when people mentioned about the hit on the head from Fanny, I said, look, you know what? I was fired up anyway, but, that probably just add an extra little bit of fuel to the fire, get me an extra 3 wickets.
There's always a place where you wanted to play somebody like Devon, who's probably the quickest bowler by some distance in English cricket at that point. And you could just let him fly, really, unleash him, bowl him in short spells. You didn't want to bowl him too many overs, 5, 6 overs max, and just tell him to come in and bowl as quickly as he could.
My captain was Michael Atherton. He came across to me and he shook me by the hand, walking off. He said, Dev, do you realize what you've just done? I said, Skip, this is what I tried to do all the while. I want all 10 for myself, really. I said, you don't believe that at the time, but this is what I want to do.
Well, that's superb bowling. And a fine return for Philip Tufnell.
Yeah, well, things had changed a bit in terms of the conditions by 97. It wasn't the quick pitch that we'd seen in 93 or 4. It was a kind of brown, worn surface. Ball was going through the top. It was a good pitch to bowl spin on by that stage. And that summer was an interesting summer. We'd started really well. We'd whopped the Australians in a one-day series. We'd won the first test, great kind of hopes that this would be our Ashes winning year. But we were 3-1 down by the time we got here. And Australia only needed 125 or something in the final innings. And then a combination of Tuffers and Andy Caddick. They both bowled superbly, actually, in their very different ways on a wearing pitch. And it was a kind of epic victory in its own way. To defend 125 against Australia, fantastic.
It's 97, I mean, one of my good days. I'll remember that for a long time. Came here, hadn't played all summer, so I was desperate for a game, desperate to have a run out for England, and yeah, luckily things went my way.
Well, I played in Tuffers' Test match in '97. For us, it was a dead rubber in '97, but it was no more memorable because of that, or no less memorable because of that. Simply because any Test match victory is a big one, particularly when it's against Australia. So, you know, the pitches here are very different from anywhere else in England, I think. Back when I was in my youth, they used to be the quickest pitches in the country. Through the 90s, they gradually got slower and slower, and they turned a little bit more. And they would offer a lot less in terms of seam movement than you would find elsewhere, but you would get that bounce and carry.
Tuffers was a terrific bowler when it spun. You know, you get some spinners who, when the pressure's on them to perform and take wickets on a turning pitch, they kind of shy away from it a bit. The pressure gets too much. A lot of spinners that I've seen are happier in some ways bowling on a pitch that doesn't spin because the expectations are not on them. But Tuffers was the opposite. When the pitch was turning, when the expectations were on him, he actually rose to the occasion more often than not. And he had a good record here. He played really well in a Test match against the West Indies. Viv Richards' final Test match, I think, back in 1991, and then bowled brilliantly in '97.
Well, that's superb bowling. Philip Tufnell finishing with 7 for 64.
Jack Hobbs in 1930, Donald Bradman in 1948, Viv Richards in 1991, and Michael Clarke in 2015 all said farewell to the Test match arena at the Oval.
Yeah, as you say, it's a place of fond farewells, even if sometimes you don't actually realise that they're going to be farewells. You know, some players are playing their last Test match in this game and they don't know it. They'll always look back on the Oval as the place where they said goodbye to Test cricket. And it's actually relatively few players who get to go out and to call, to designate a game as being their farewell. More often the game is sort of naturally deciduous.
Myself, Graham Thorpe, Martin Bicknell, who that was to be his last Test match as well, and obviously seeing off Alec, who still holds the record for the number of caps as an England player. Very, very special to have four Surrey players in the team at the time. And I guess it was almost the end of an era, I suppose, in terms of the amount of Surrey players we'd have in Test match colours.
Alex Stewart's last Test match, we ended up on the pitch playing football with a Swiss ball in Stewie's last game. You know, still dirty playing even with a Swiss ball.
Yeah, listen, I couldn't have wished for anything better. The way to finish your career, and the finish, as you quite rightly say, at your home ground. Now, the fact it was my last Test match was very much I wanted it on the back burner. You know, it wasn't about me, it was about can England beat South Africa. Fortunately, we did that. We won it by 9 wickets, which was a fantastic way to finish. To give me that guard of honour, which I hadn't seen before, was very special. Right through until a good mate of mine, Sean Pollock. It was the last one who offered his hand, and I shook it, and he just said, "Remember how many Sir Donald Bradman got on his last Test match at this ground?" and then had a smile. You know, so I love my career playing for Surrey, playing for England, to finish it here in front of the home fans, but also to win the Test match, to square the series up, was like a fairy tale.
Quite often, when great careers come to an end, they don't come to an end in a way that, in any sort of way that the player would have liked it. It's either ended by injury or bad form, etc. And I think it was only fitting for Alec that you know, he was able to play his last Test match in front of his home fans at the ground that he adores and that adores him still, I think. You know, they built a gate for him, didn't they?
For fans and players alike, the Oval is a place of celebration. When England won the Ashes back in 1985, David Gower was at the centre of the jubilant scenes.
Pavilion end, of course, at the end of the game, 1985, the end of an Ashes series, successful one, my one successful Ashes captaincy. So a very proud moment from that point of view. And in the afternoon, we'd or over the first day we put runs on the board. Second day we took Australian wickets, made them follow on, and won the game. And we then actually, there were some clouds looming, I think, but it didn't matter. By the time we got off the field, it was cue the celebrations, because that was, what, a 6-match series. It seemed to have taken forever. And so you have this sort of huge release of, well, joy because you've won, and energy and all the rest of it. But on the balcony there, I had 1 or 2 people with bottles of champagne spraying them in my face, Ian Botham smirking gently behind me with a can of Australian lager, just pouring it gently over my head. So it was a very wet occasion, but you don't mind that under those circumstances.
20 years later, the streets of Kennington were once again filled with joyful cricket fans as the greatest series of all time was concluded in South London.
Throughout the summer it was amazing, but I think, you know, to come here with the series on a knife edge, I think that made it even bigger. It was just a great place to be, to appreciate the series that had been.
I remember reading, and you know, they were saying that 2005, the Oval Test match, was the next biggest sporting occasion after 1966. It felt that big.
The series was on terrestrial television. It was watched by millions and millions of people. I think 12.5 million people watched that final day of the Ashes.
You know, the tickets were the hottest in town. Everyone wanted to be at that game, and the game had everything. It had the tricky positions that we were in. It had Australia dominating for periods of play. There was bad light, there was a bit of rain. And then on the last day, I don't think you could ever have expected what was going to happen with the arrival of Kevin Pietersen.
It's a super confident drive. He has played some fantastic cricket today. What a bit of batting.
Being his first Test series against the best team that's ever played the game, in my opinion. He'd shown glimpses of what he could do. He batted really well at Lords. He belted McGrath everywhere. He got after Shane Warne. And he started to kind of impose himself on the series. But he never kind of went big. And for him to do what he did here at the Oval, when we needed it most, to get 158, I think it was, against arguably the best bowling attack in the game. He had Shane Warne one end, McGrath, Brett Lee bowling thunderbolts, and Kev just batted out of his skin. And as a very good friend of his, I couldn't have been more proud.
You read all the papers before that going, we need one hero, and I was desperate to really go out there and say, right, this is a day where you test your mettle. I wanted to do it. I was desperate to be the person to score those runs. I was desperate to be the person to bat all day and come off at the end of the day being really proud about achieving something for that side.
I was just the first one on the balcony clapping him because I was just so pleased for him. This is what he wanted to do. He wanted to play Test cricket. He was so hungry at the time. He was young. He was exuberant. He expressed himself, and he was a breath of fresh air into that team. And to see him play like that was outstanding.
Is that the moment or what? Most extraordinary. And it just goes, it doesn't go that quick. He's got good hands as Shane Warne. That's a big miss for them. Huge miss.
The funny thing is, obviously, it's probably because of our two personalities that gets so much noise. I was dropped by Gilchrist and Hayden just before that, which doesn't get the noise that it probably deserved because I wasn't even in then. At least I was getting myself in and I was playing a few shots when I got dropped by Warney. So, but I just still don't understand how I nicked that ball. I just see that ball coming through the air and I can picture it coming through the air now. And it just seems like a scoring shot. And maybe I just go too hard at it or I'm a bit too lazy on it because I think it's too full and I can just clap it through the covers.
I just remember at tea time on the last day, sitting in our commentary box here at the Vauxhall end of the ground and looking out around and just seeing all of these people clinging to chimney tops, hanging out of balconies, hanging out of windows, and on the roof of the Archbishop Tennyson School. It was just an extraordinary atmosphere. You know, everyone knew what was going to happen because we had a very tense day, of course, anyway. But then at tea, people had relaxed a bit, and it was a party.
The biggest thing was when obviously the umpires went out and flicked the bails off. The lads we just went into uproar. You know, the longest 6 months of your life. It's the most stressful time of your life as well. But to achieve what we'd wanted to do and beat the best team in the world, and to do it here at the Oval was even more special.
at the time not thinking about cricket history. We're thinking about how much we can drink and how much we can party with our buddies and how much we can celebrate. But you look back at it now and it was a very historic series, and it's one of the greatest test series of modern day times. And to be a part of that, to be involved in that, for it to finish here at this beautiful ground was something, or not was something, it will be something that I will treasure for the rest of my life. Those things you just can't take away from people. And throughout my career, people have said, what are your greatest moments? What are your greatest achievements? And what brings you the most happiest moments? Standing on a podium, picking up a trophy with the team is better than scoring a Test 100.
And the whole ground, it felt like the whole country was singing Jerusalem, and all the different songs that they'd sung throughout the whole series. Everyone was on the roofs, on the school roof, on the flats. If you're in London, you wanted to be here, you wanted to be within an eye shot of the team and of what the team was celebrating, and it was a very special time.
There it is. England have regained the Ashes.
For 135 years, the final Test at the Oval has been a special part of this country's incredible heritage. It has created vivid memories, extraordinary performances, and emotional goodbyes, and brought the curtain down on the nation's sporting summer.
You know, I just think there's something about cricket. Cricket has that kind of feeling of real tradition, and you know you're a part of a legacy, you know you're a part of something that's very, very special. And this is the ground where the urn is lifted. This is the ground where everyone sees the lucky captain to lift the urn. So I guess those pictures that are sent worldwide and are, I guess, shown years and years away from the actual moment makes the Oval a very, very special place.
It's a very welcoming location for Australians coming all this way, and of course they're on the brink of going home. A lot of the players will know that their next stop will be Australia, so it's their last chance to make a mark on English soil and a place where they can lay down some important memories.
Well, it's always been a special ground for the Indians because of the fact that they have invariably done well. And the atmosphere is absolutely fantastic.
Those days used to bring their musical instruments, they could play their music, they could bring their drinks and their food, they could have a fantastic party. And that is what was so appealing to the West Indians here at the Oval.
Regardless of what happens in terms of the match, regardless of whether or not the Ashes are on the line, which often they are, regardless of whether or not the series is up for grabs, come the last Test match of the summer, it's always the Oval, it has to be the Oval, and it's as simple as that.